The text message came through at 6:47 in the morning. I remember the time because I was staring at the ceiling of the pre-op holding room, counting the tiles for the third time, when my phone buzzed on the little wheeled tray beside the bed. The nurse had told me to leave it with my belongings, but I kept it close. I needed to feel close to something. Sloan. I've thought about this for a long time. I want a divorce. I can't do another year of hospitals and prescriptions, and you being tired all the time. I'm not built for this. The papers are with my lawyer. I won't be there today. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. My husband. 11 years married. 3 months after my diagnosis. 43 minutes before they wheeled me into surgery to remove a tumor the size of a lemon from my left ovary. I read it 4 times. The fluorescent light above me hummed. Somewhere down the hallway, a metal cart rattled past, and a woman laughed at something a man said, and the world kept turning like nothing had cracked open. I didn't cry. That's the part I always come back to when I tell this story. I didn't cry. I just set the phone face down on the tray and folded my hands across my stomach, where they'd already drawn the dotted lines in purple marker, and I waited to be put under. I'm 31 years old. I teach 4th grade at a public elementary school on the south side of Pittsburgh. My students that year were the kind of class that comes along maybe once in a teacher's life. Funny and curious, and so kind to each other that the principal used to come stand in my doorway just to watch them work. When I told them I'd be out for a few weeks, a little boy named Mateo handed me a folded piece of construction paper. Inside, in pencil, he'd written, "Come back soon, Miss S. We will save your chair." I kept that paper in my purse. I still have it. My husband, the one I'll call him by his role now because I can't bring myself to say his name anymore, worked in commercial real estate. We met at a wedding when I was 20. He was 26, charming in the way that men are charming when they've decided to be, and for a long time I believed I'd been chosen. That's the word I used. Chosen, like it was a prize. The diagnosis came in late September. I'd been bloated for months. My periods had gone strange. I went to my OB thinking it was stress, and 3 appointments later, I was sitting in a different office across from a woman with kind eyes who said the word malignancy and then asked me if I wanted water. My husband came to the first oncology consult. He held my hand in the parking lot afterward. He cried a little, which surprised me. For 2 weeks he was tender. He cooked. He sent me articles about diet and fertility preservation. And then, slowly, the way a tide goes out, he started not coming home for dinner. He started traveling more. He started sleeping in the guest room because I need real rest. "Sloan, I can't function if I'm up all night with you." He stopped asking about my appointments. By the time the surgery date was on the calendar, he'd reduced the whole thing to a logistical problem he was tired of solving. The morning of the surgery, my mother was supposed to drive me. She'd flown in from Tucson the night before. But at 5:30 a.m., she'd slipped on the front steps of my house in her rush to load the car, and she'd broken her wrist. I sat with her in a different ER for an hour before a cab took me to the hospital alone. I told her to stay. I told her I was fine. I told her my husband would meet me there. He didn't. The anesthesiologist was a woman with a soft voice and a wedding ring she kept turning around her finger. She asked me if there was anyone I wanted them to call if something went wrong. I gave her my mother's number. Then I looked at the ceiling and I disappeared. When I woke up, I didn't know where I was for a long minute. There was a curtain on my right side, half drawn. My throat was raw. My stomach felt like someone had stapled it shut and then sat on it. A monitor beeped to the rhythm of something that was supposedly my heart, and across the room, near the window, I could hear someone turning the page of a book. I tried to say something, and what came out was a sound like a dying radiator. The page turning stopped. A man's voice said, "Hey, easy, don't try to talk yet, I'll get the nurse." I heard him press the call button. I heard the soft scrape of a chair, and then a face appeared at the edge of my curtain. A man maybe a few years older than me, with dark hair that needed a cut and the kind of stubble that suggested he'd been in that bed for a while. He was wearing a navy blue hospital gown over a long-sleeved shirt, and he was holding a paperback with his fingers stuck between the pages to save his place. "You're okay," he said. "You came through fine. They told me when they wheeled you in. I'm right over there. I'm not going to bother you. I just didn't want you to wake up alone." I started crying then. I don't know why it took until that moment, but it did. Big, silent, ugly tears that ran sideways into my hair because I couldn't lift my head. He didn't say anything. He just stood there for a second, and then he very carefully reached through the curtain and set a folded napkin on the pillow next to my face, and went back to his side of the room. That was the first time I met the man in the next bed. I'd been moved into a shared recovery room because the private room they promised me had been given to a post-cardiac patient who needed it more. The nurse who came in apologized about 6 times. She said it would just be for one night. She said the man in the other bed was very nice, very quiet. He's been here 3 days. He's recovering from a hernia repair. You won't even know he's there. I remember thinking that didn't sound true at all. He'd already brought me a napkin. His name. I'll just say what he called himself. He told me his name was Wes. He was 36. He said he was a teacher too, sort of. Sort of a teacher was the way he put it, which I thought was funny at the time. He said he taught classes occasionally. He was vague in a way that I took for shyness. He asked if I wanted him to call someone for me. I told him no. I told him my husband had texted me a divorce request that morning and that my mother had broken her wrist trying to get me to the hospital. I don't know why I told him all of that. I'd known him for 9 minutes. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Well, that's a lot." And then he asked me what my mother liked to read, because he had a whole stack of paperbacks his sister had brought him, and he could send her home with some. He did too. The next morning, when my mother finally got there in a lift with her arm in a fresh blue cast, he was sitting up in his bed and he handed her 3 novels off his nightstand and said, "Please take these. My sister keeps bringing more and I'm going to lose my mind." My mother, who is a hard woman to charm, was charmed. She kept looking at him sideways over the course of the day. After he fell asleep in the afternoon, she leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Honey, that man is not a teacher." I told her she didn't know what she was talking about. The hospital stay turned into 4 days. The pathology came back not great. The tumor had been more involved than they thought. I was going to need chemo. 6 rounds, starting in about 3 weeks. Once I'd healed enough to handle it, my oncologist sat at the foot of my bed and explained it all very gently, and across the room the man in the next bed pretended to read his book and didn't look up once, the way you do when you're trying to give someone privacy in a place where there isn't any. After she left, he said, without looking at me, "You're going to be okay." "You don't know that," I said. "No," he said. "But I think it, and I'm usually right about people." That night, the painkillers made me strange and brave, and at maybe 2 in the morning, when neither of us could sleep, I said into the dark, "If I survive this whole thing, you should marry me. I'm running low on people willing to show up." I meant it as a joke. I really did. I was half drugged and the curtain was open between us, and the city lights were doing something pretty on the wall, and it was the kind of thing you say to a stranger in a hospital at 2 in the morning because nothing feels real. He laughed. A real laugh. Not a polite one. And then he said, "Okay." "Okay, what?" "Okay. If you survive, we'll get married." I laughed too. I laughed until my stitches hurt. In the morning, a nurse I hadn't seen before came in to check his vitals. She was older, maybe 50, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She glanced at him, then at me, and she froze for just a second. Then she said, in a strange, tight voice, "Sir, your team is asking for you in radiology. Can you come now?" He got up slowly. He looked tired. Before he left, he looked back at me, and he said, "I'll be back. Don't go anywhere, Sloan." After he was gone, the nurse stayed in the room for a moment, fussing with my IV line that didn't need fussing with. Then she said, very quietly, "Honey, do you know who that man is?" "Wes," I said. "He's a teacher." She stared at me. She opened her mouth. She closed it. Then she said, "Okay, sweetheart, get some rest." And she left. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too tired. I was also thinking about my husband who had not called, who had not texted, who I would learn that afternoon, already changed the locks on our house. My mother handled everything in those first weeks. She is, I have learned, a woman who comes alive in a crisis. She got me a lawyer. She got my things out of the house. She set me up in her friend's empty guest cottage in Mount Lebanon while we figured out next steps. The lawyer's name was a woman who used to work prosecution in domestic cases, and she took one look at my situation and said, "Sloan, this man is going to try something. Men like him always do. Be ready." I started chemo 3 weeks later. My mother drove me. My students made me a chain of paper hearts that hung in my window through the whole winter. I lost my hair in clumps in the shower, and the day it really started coming out, I sat on the bathroom floor and laughed until I cried because I couldn't think what else to do. I did not hear from the man in the next bed during those first few weeks. I told myself I was being ridiculous to think about him at all. He had been a kind stranger and a bad night. That was the whole story. And then, on the morning of my second chemo round, a package arrived at the cottage. A book, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Inside, on the title page, someone had written in careful handwriting, "Heard you'd be sitting in a chair for a few hours. This one is good for chairs. W." There was no return address, just a postmark from a town outside the city that I didn't recognize. I read it through both my second and third infusions. I cried at the part where the father dies. The nurses all thought I was crying because of the chemo. I let them think that. The fourth round was the worst. I got an infection. I was hospitalized for 9 days. My mother slept in the chair by my bed. On the fifth morning, a delivery came to the nurses' station. A small bundle of yellow tulips and a card that said, "Only still here. W." My mother held the card in her hand for a long time. Then she said, very evenly, "Sloan, I want to tell you something. While you were sedated last fall, that man in the bed next to you had his security detail change shifts in the hallway. I watched it happen. I didn't say anything because you needed something good. But you should know." I stared at her. "He's not just a teacher, baby. He never was. I'll tell you what I learned, eventually, in pieces. He did teach. That part was true. He taught a graduate seminar 1 semester a year at a university in Pennsylvania on policy and ethics as a kind of pro bono thing, but the rest of his life was that he ran a private foundation that his grandfather had started, and his family owned a controlling stake in a company you have heard of. I will not say which one. He was, in the language of magazines, a quiet billionaire. He had been in that shared hospital room because he had checked in under a different name and refused a private room. He told me later, much later, that he did this every time he had a procedure. I don't want to be that person in the hospital. I don't want them to act different around me. It's the one place I want to just be a guy. I did not know any of this on the morning of my fourth chemo round. I just knew that yellow tulips had shown up and that a stranger I had laughed with at 2 in the morning seemed to remember I existed. The divorce was filed in October. The first thing my husband did was empty our joint accounts. The second thing he did was hire a lawyer who specialized in what my lawyer called getting away with it. The third thing he did, and I did not know about this until much later, was begin a quiet relationship with a woman named, well, I'll come to her in a minute. His central claim when the proceedings started in earnest in January was that I was incapacitated. That was the legal word. He claimed that the cancer and the treatment had impaired my judgment to the point that I could not be trusted with the marital assets, and that the house I put the down payment on with money my grandmother left me, should go to him because Sloan is not in a state to manage property right now. He brought a witness, a medical professional who, he said, had cared for me during my hospital stays and who could speak to my mental state. The witness was a nurse. Her name, when she walked into the deposition room, was Camille. She was striking, tall, very put together, the kind of woman who walks into a room like she's already won something. I had never seen her in my life. She testified that she had observed me on multiple occasions during my treatment. She testified that I was confused, emotionally erratic, and unable to make sound decisions. She testified that I had, on one occasion, told her I was engaged to a stranger I met in the hospital, and that I had been unable to provide his name or any details about him, and that this had concerned her deeply. My lawyer let her finish. My lawyer is, I have learned, a woman who lets people finish. Then my lawyer asked Camille how long she had worked at the hospital where I'd had my surgery. Camille said 3 years. My lawyer asked her to confirm the dates of my admissions. Camille confirmed them. My lawyer asked her if she had ever been romantically involved with my husband. There was a very long silence. My husband's lawyer objected. My lawyer said, I'm happy to enter into evidence the hotel receipts, the parking garage records, and the text messages, but I thought we might save some time. Camille had been my husband's mistress for 14 months, including the months when I was sick, including the morning of my surgery when she had been the one to drive him to the airport, because he had not, in fact, been working late the night before. He had been with her. The text messages my lawyer's investigator had pulled from a subpoena to the hotel's Wi-Fi logs were not subtle. Camille had also, it turned out, never actually been one of my assigned nurses. She had been on the floor, yes. She had clocked in for the shifts she claimed, but the nursing assignment records showed that she had been responsible for a different wing of the hospital on every single date she had cited. She had never legally accessed my chart. The privacy violation alone, my lawyer said gently to the judge, raises questions about this witness's credibility that I think Your Honor will appreciate. The judge appreciated it. The proceedings adjourned. My husband sat very still in his chair and did not look at me. Camille left through a side door. Outside, in the hallway, I went into the bathroom and threw up, and then I washed my face and went back out. A man was standing by the elevators. He'd cut his hair. He was wearing a charcoal suit. He looked, I realized, like the version of himself he had been hiding from me, but his eyes were the same. "Hi," he said. "Hi," he said. "I told you I'd be back." I started laughing. I couldn't stop. He tipped my elbow, very gently, and walked me to a bench near the window, and sat down next to me, and waited. When I could breathe again, I said, "You're not a teacher." "I am a teacher," he said. "I am a teacher," he said. "I'm also some other things. My mother knew. Your mother is sharp." I looked at him. I said, "Why did you come back?" He thought about it for a long time. He said, "Because you said something to me at 2 a.m. that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Because I sat in a hospital bed and watched a woman get the worst news of her life and not break. And I thought, I want to know what's inside a person like that. And because nobody has talked to me like a real person in a very long time, and that night you did." I said I was on a lot of painkillers. He said, "I know. But you meant it. And so did I." The divorce was finalized in March. I kept the house. I kept my grandmother's money. My husband lost his job at the firm, not because of the affair. They didn't care about that, but because the deposition transcripts had been entered into public record, and his client list had not appreciated the picture that emerged. Camille's nursing license was suspended pending an investigation into the privacy violations. The last I heard, she was selling something on Instagram. I went back to school in April. My students had, as Mateo promised, saved my chair. They had also, with the help of their families, raised $412 for the pediatric oncology floor at the hospital where I had been treated, which they had decided to do without telling me, and which Mateo presented to me in an envelope with a card that he had made himself. I cried in front of all of them. I did not try to hide it. The man, Wes, I still call him Wes, even though it isn't quite his real name. And I did not get married right away. We waited a year. We did it on a Saturday in May in my mother's backyard in Tucson, with 30 people. My mother walked me down a path of stones she had laid herself. Mateo and 3 other students from that class came. Wes wore a regular suit, not a fancy one, and when the officiant asked him if he took me, he said, "Yes, I do. I have since the first night," and my mother dabbed her eyes and gave me a look that meant, "I told you so." We bought a house together that summer, a small one on a quiet street, with a porch and a maple tree out front. We did not move into his other houses. I did not want them. He understood. He has, in fact, understood almost everything I have ever needed him to understand, which is a thing I did not know was possible in a marriage until I had one. I'll tell you the part that still surprises me, even now, 2 years later. It isn't the money. I had thought, when I learned who he really was, that the money would be the thing, that it would change how I felt or how I moved through the world. It hasn't, particularly. We live a quiet life. I still teach 4th grade. He still teaches his 1 seminar a year. It isn't even the betrayal. I have made peace, mostly, with the man who left me on a surgery morning. I think about him sometimes, and I feel mostly tired and a little sad for the version of myself who spent 11 years trying to be enough for him. The thing that surprises me, the thing I come back to, is that on the worst morning of my life, when I had been left and abandoned and was about to be opened up by strangers, the universe had already put a man in the bed next to mine who would, in time, become my husband. He was already there. He was already reading a book. He was already someone who would set a napkin on my pillow without saying anything, because he understood that some kinds of grief need to be private even when you can't be alone for them. I don't believe in fate the way some people do. I don't think anyone planned this, but I think about the timing of it, the way 2 surgeries on 2 strangers happened to land in the same room on the same morning, and I think there is more luck in a life than we know to look for. There is more kindness too, sitting in the next bed, waiting for us to wake up. My mother says she still has those novels he gave her. She says she has not read them. She's saving them, she says, for a long winter. I think she's lying. I think she read them all that fall, in the chair beside my hospital bed while I slept. I think she knew before I did. Mothers usually do. Mateo is in 8th grade now. He sends me a card every year on the anniversary of the day I came back to school. The last one said, "Miss S., I hope your husband knows he is lucky." From Mateo. I framed it. It hangs in our kitchen, next to the window over the sink. I see it every morning when I make coffee. I see it, and I think about a hospital room and a paperback book and a stranger who said okay and meant it. That's the whole story. That's how it happened. I am still surprised some mornings to find that it was mine. I've thought a lot in the years since about why my life turned the way it did. Not in a mystical way. In the practical, sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee kind of way. And what I keep coming back to is this. Every part of what happened to me was a result of choices. Mine. His. Other people's. None of it was random. My husband, the one who left, made a choice on a September morning to send a text instead of show up. He didn't trip into that decision. He'd been training for it for months. He'd been moving slowly toward the exit the whole time I was getting sicker, and the text was just the last step in a long walk. When a person practices walking away in small ways, the big walk away becomes easy. That's a law I'd never thought about until it happened to me. Camille made her choices too. She decided that being someone's secret was worth her license, her career, her dignity. She thought she was building something. She was, instead, dismantling herself one shift at a time. The thing about deceit is that it always leaves a paper trail somewhere. A hotel receipt, a parking record, a Wi-Fi log. People who lie think they're being clever. They're just being temporary. But the part I want to sit with longer is the part about Wes. Because here is what I have come to understand. He was kind to me in the hospital before he knew anything about me. He didn't know I'd been left. He didn't know I had a tumor or a job or a class of 4th graders who loved me. He set a napkin on my pillow because that was already who he was, in the dark, with nobody watching. Character isn't what you show. It's what's there when nobody's looking. I think this is what I'd want my students to understand, if I could tell them just one thing about being a grown-up. The kind of person you become in private is the kind of person who shows up in your life. If you practice kindness when no one is keeping score, you build a self that knows how to be kind in a crisis. If you practice honesty in small things, you become someone who can tell the truth when it's hard. And if you practice showing up for yourself, for the people in front of you, even strangers, then on the worst morning of someone's life, you might be the person who reaches through a curtain. I am not the same woman who was wheeled into surgery that morning. I'm steadier. I'm less afraid. I learned that I could be left and not destroyed. That I could be sick and still be myself. That I could trust a stranger and have it turn out to be the smartest thing I ever did. I learned that resilience isn't a thing you're born with. It's a thing you build, the way you'd build a stone wall, one slow rock at a time, on a morning when no one's watching. That's the law I live by now. The one I wish I'd known sooner.